Have you ever wondered what would happen if you met your own family at 6 different income levels? At $0, they worry about you. At 10,000, they encourage you. At 100,000, they ask for your advice. At 1 million, they ask for your money. And at 10 million, they act like they always believed in you. The strange thing is, you're still the same person. So what really changed? Your character? Or their perception? This is the story of Daniel, a man who accidentally discovered that money doesn't just change your lifestyle. Sometimes, it changes the way people look at you. And the people who change the most are often the ones who have known you the longest. When Daniel was 23, he had 2 things: big dreams and an empty wallet. His bank account barely stayed above zero. He rented a tiny room in his uncle's house. The ceiling leaked whenever it rained. The fan only worked if you hit it twice. His mattress was so thin that every morning he woke up with a sore back. Still, he never complained. Every morning, before the sun came up, he left the house carrying the same worn backpack. Inside it were copies of his resume, a bottle of water, and a notebook filled with business ideas. He wasn't looking for shortcuts. He was looking for one opportunity. One person willing to give him a chance. Most days ended the same way. "Thank you for applying. We'll call you. We've decided to move forward with another candidate." At first, those words hurt. After hearing them dozens of times, they became background noise. What hurt more was going back home. His family wasn't cruel. Not intentionally. They simply judged him through the easiest lens they had. Results? At dinner, conversations flowed around the table. His older cousin talked about his promotion. Everyone listened. His aunt proudly showed photos of her daughter's new apartment. Everyone clapped. Then silence. Someone looked at Daniel. "So, any good news?" He forced a smile. "Not yet." His uncle nodded slowly. "You need to be realistic." His aunt added. "Dreams don't pay bills." Another relative laughed. "When I was your age, I already had a family to feed." Daniel smiled politely. But every word landed like a small weight on his shoulders. He noticed something else. Whenever he shared an idea, people barely reacted. One evening he said, "I think more people will start working online over the next few years." Nobody responded. 5 minutes later, his successful cousin said almost the exact same thing. Immediately the room came alive. "That's actually smart. I never thought about it that way." Daniel looked down at his plate. It wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. Slowly, he stopped speaking. Not because he had nothing to say, because he started believing nobody wanted to hear it. Weeks turned into months. His savings never grew because there were no savings to grow. Every small amount he earned from temporary jobs disappeared into transport, food, and helping with household expenses. Sometimes he wondered if this was simply what adulthood looked like. Work, struggle, repeat. Then one afternoon, something happened that stayed with him for years. He walked past the kitchen and overheard 2 relatives talking. "I worry about Daniel." "So do I. I don't think he's going to make it. He always has ideas. But ideas don't put food on the table." Daniel froze. Neither of them knew he was there. Neither of them meant to hurt him. They genuinely believed they were speaking the truth. That night, sleep refused to come. He lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling. Maybe they were right. Maybe he wasn't meant for anything bigger. Maybe his dreams were unrealistic. Then another thought entered his mind. A question so simple, yet impossible to ignore. If I suddenly became successful tomorrow, would these same people still talk about me this way? The question echoed in his mind for days. Eventually, he stopped asking it. Instead, he decided to answer it. Not with arguments. Not with speeches. With action. A few weeks later, After dozens of interviews and countless rejections, Daniel finally received a phone call. "We'd like to offer you the position." It wasn't a glamorous job. The pay wasn't impressive. Most people wouldn't have celebrated. Daniel did. Because this wasn't just a job. It was the first brick in a foundation he had been trying to build for years. On his first payday, he held the paycheck in his hands longer than necessary. Not because it was a lot of money. Because it represented hope. He made himself one promise. "I won't try to look rich. I'll become financially strong, quietly." No expensive clothes. No flashy purchases. No pretending. Every extra dollar would have a purpose. Save. Learn. Invest. Repeat. He had no idea that this simple promise would completely change his life. And he definitely didn't know that earning his first $10,000 would be the moment his family started seeing a completely different version of him. Daniel threw himself into work. He wasn't chasing luxury. He was chasing breathing room. The kind of breathing room where you don't panic every time your phone rings. The kind where one unexpected bill doesn't destroy your entire month. His co-workers spent their first few paychecks celebrating. New phones. Designer shoes. Weekend trips. Daniel celebrated differently. He opened a savings account. Every payday, before he bought anything for himself, he moved a small amount into it. At first, it felt pointless. Some weeks it was only $20. Other weeks $50. Once in a while, $100. The numbers looked tiny. But Daniel reminded himself of something. You don't build a wall by placing one giant brick. You build it one brick at a time. His routine became almost boring. Wake up. Go to work. Come home. Read. Study. Sleep. Repeat. While his friends watched television after work, Daniel watched videos about budgeting, investing, and building wealth. He filled notebook after notebook with ideas. Some failed before they even started. A few made him a little extra money. Most taught him lessons that no classroom ever could. Months became a year. Then another. One Friday evening, Daniel logged into his banking app. He stared at the screen. His savings had officially crossed $10,000. He smiled. Nobody clapped. Nobody celebrated. There were no fireworks. Just one young man sitting alone in a small room, quietly realizing that his life had changed. Not because $10,000 made him rich. Because it meant he finally had something he had never owned before. Options. If his car broke down, he could fix it. If he lost his job, he wouldn't immediately panic. If an opportunity appeared, he could actually afford to take it. That feeling was priceless. Daniel kept living exactly the same way. His clothes didn't change. His apartment didn't change. His habits didn't change. But something else did. His family's attitude. One Sunday afternoon, everyone gathered for lunch. As Daniel walked in, his uncle smiled. "There he is! Still working hard?" Daniel nodded. "Yeah." His uncle patted him on the shoulder. "Good. Keep going." It wasn't a dramatic moment. But Daniel noticed something. Nobody asked him when he was going to get his life together anymore. Nobody called him unrealistic. Nobody compared him to his successful cousin. For the first time, he wasn't treated like the family's biggest disappointment. He was simply a hard-working young man. Driving home that evening, Daniel couldn't stop thinking. The strange part wasn't that people were being kinder. The strange part was how little had actually changed. He was still the same person. He still laughed at the same jokes. He still had the same dreams. He still cared about the same people. The only real difference was a number inside a bank account that almost nobody had even seen. It made him wonder how much of respect is earned and how much is assumed. Daniel didn't dwell on it. He kept moving forward. Every raise went into investments. Every bonus had a purpose. He learned to ignore trends, ignore shortcuts, ignore people promising overnight success. He focused on consistency. Months turned into years. Slowly, the small investments started growing. Interest earned interest. Dividends bought more investments. His side projects began generating income even while he slept. It wasn't magic. It was patience. Then one rainy evening, Daniel refreshed his investment account. The number appeared. $100,247. He blinked. Refreshed the page. Still there. He had officially built a six-figure net worth. For a few minutes, he simply sat in silence. His mind drifted back to the tiny bedroom. The cracked ceiling. The borrowed bus fare. The relatives who thought he'd never make it. He smiled. Not because he wanted revenge. Because he was grateful he hadn't listened. Word spread faster than he expected. Daniel never posted about his money online. He never showed off. But families have a strange way of finding things out. A cousin asked where he worked. An uncle noticed he had paid cash for a reliable used car. Someone mentioned he'd been investing for years. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. Then something fascinating happened. The exact people who once ignored his opinions started asking for them. Daniel, what do you think about investing? Is it too late to start saving? How do you decide where to put your money? One aunt even laughed and said, "You've always been good with finances." Daniel almost smiled. Always? There was a time when nobody wanted to hear a single financial idea he had. Now, the room became quiet whenever he spoke. One evening, during another family dinner, his cousin leaned across the table. "I've been thinking about starting a business. What would you do if you were me?" Daniel answered honestly. He talked about building an emergency fund first, about avoiding unnecessary debt, about starting small instead of borrowing huge amounts. Everyone nodded. His uncle even said, "That's solid advice." Daniel looked around the table. These were almost the exact same ideas he had shared years ago. Back then, they sounded like dreams. Today, they sounded like wisdom. What changed? Not the advice. The person giving it. Or more accurately, the money behind the person giving it. For a while, Daniel believed this was the best life could get. Respect, stability, peace. Then his phone rang one Tuesday evening. The caller's name made him pause. It was a cousin he hadn't spoken to in almost 5 years. Daniel answered with a smile. "Hey! It's been a long time." The cousin laughed warmly. "It has. We should really catch up." For the first few minutes, they talked about old memories. School, childhood, family gatherings. Then the conversation shifted. "So, I heard you've been doing really well." Daniel felt a quiet knot form in his stomach. He answered carefully, "I've been fortunate." There was a brief silence. Then came the sentence that would completely change the next chapter of his life. "I actually need a small favor." Daniel leaned back in his chair. He had a feeling he already knew where the conversation was going. His cousin hesitated for a moment. "I've run into a little financial problem. It's temporary. I just need a small loan." Daniel listened quietly. His cousin explained that he had fallen behind on a few bills and promised to repay every dollar within 3 months. It sounded genuine. Daniel remembered what it felt like to have nothing. He remembered borrowing bus fare. He remembered praying that someone would believe in him. So he said yes. "Don't worry about it. I'll send it tonight." His cousin thanked him over and over. "You saved me. I'll never forget this." Daniel smiled. Helping family felt good. 3 months passed. No repayment. No phone call. No apology. Daniel didn't bring it up. He assumed life had simply gotten in the way. Then another call came. This time it was an aunt. Her refrigerator had stopped working. She needed help replacing it. Daniel helped. A few weeks later, An uncle asked for assistance repairing his car. Daniel helped again. Then another cousin needed money for school fees. Another relative wanted help starting a small business. One request became 5. 5 became 10. Soon, helping family had become part of Daniel's monthly budget. At first, he didn't mind. He told himself, "If I'm in a position to help, why shouldn't I?" After all, these were the people he loved. But slowly, something changed. The phone rarely rang just to ask how he was doing. Birthdays suddenly became much more important. Relatives who hadn't spoken to him in years began sending warm messages. "Just checking on you. We miss you. We should spend time together." At first, Daniel believed them. Then he noticed a pattern. Every conversation eventually reached the same destination: money. Sometimes it took 5 minutes. Sometimes 20. But it always arrived. One evening, he met an old cousin for coffee. They laughed about childhood memories, talked about school, shared stories. As they stood up to leave, the cousin smiled awkwardly. "Oh, there's actually one more thing." Daniel's heart sank. He already knew. "I was wondering if you could lend me a little money." Walking back to his car, Daniel realized something that made him uncomfortable. He couldn't remember the last conversation with extended family that hadn't involved finances. For the first time, he asked himself a painful question. Do they miss me? Or do they miss what I can provide? Despite everything, Daniel kept saying yes. Because every no felt selfish. Because he remembered what struggling felt like. Because he didn't want anyone to experience the fear he once lived with. Meanwhile, his career continued growing. His investments continued compounding. His business expanded. After years of discipline, his net worth crossed $500,000. 500,000. The number was exciting. But it wasn't the expensive house that made him happiest. It wasn't the nicer car parked outside. It wasn't the freedom to travel. It was waking up without constant financial anxiety. For the first time in his adult life, money wasn't something he feared. It had become a tool, not a source of stress. Ironically, that was exactly when other people started seeing him differently. Family gatherings felt completely different now. When Daniel arrived, people stood up to greet him. His opinions carried weight. Relatives asked him to sit near them. Even conversations changed. Instead of asking, "When are you getting your life together?" people asked, "How's business? What are you investing in now? What's the next big opportunity?" Daniel answered politely. But deep inside, he noticed another shift. People weren't just respecting him. Some were studying him, comparing themselves to him. One afternoon, while walking toward the kitchen, Daniel overheard another conversation. Just like years before. Only this time, the words were different. "He makes so much money now. I wonder how much he actually has. Probably more than he admits." Another voice whispered, "It must be nice." The tone wasn't admiration. It was envy. That was new. Over the next few months, the whispers grew louder. "If I had his opportunities, I'd be rich too. He got lucky. Some people are just in the right place at the right time." Very few people mentioned the years Daniel spent working late. The weekends he sacrificed. The vacations he never took. The nights he stayed awake studying while everyone else slept. Success had erased the memory of his struggle. People only saw the destination, never the journey. Then came the requests that were impossible to ignore. One relative wanted Daniel to co-sign a loan. Another wanted him to invest in a business idea that existed only on paper. Someone else expected him to pay for an expensive family vacation because "You're the one who can afford it." Every request came wrapped in the same sentence: "We're family." Daniel started losing sleep. He wanted to help. But every time he said yes, the next request became bigger. The next expectation became heavier. He finally understood something no one had ever taught him. Generosity without boundaries doesn't always create gratitude. Sometimes, it creates entitlement. Still, the hardest lesson was yet to come. Because one evening, a rumor began spreading through the family. A rumor so damaging that it would change the way everyone looked at Daniel. And it all started with one simple sentence. "I don't think he earned that money honestly." Rumors have a strange way of traveling. Nobody knows where they begin. Nobody wants to admit they're repeating them. But somehow, they always find their destination. Daniel didn't hear the rumor immediately. At first, he only noticed small changes. Conversation stopped when he walked into the room. People smiled, but the smiles felt forced. Some relatives avoided eye contact. Others stared a little longer than usual. It was subtle, easy to dismiss. Until one afternoon, Daniel was visiting his mother when she asked a question that caught him completely off guard. She looked at him quietly and said, "Son, can I ask you something?" "Of course." She hesitated. "Some people in the family are saying your money came from questionable business." Daniel didn't answer right away. He simply looked at her. Not because he was angry. Because he was disappointed. He had spent years building a reputation one honest decision at a time. Yet a single rumor had made people question everything. His mother reached across the table and held his hand. "I told them they were wrong. I know how hard you've worked." Daniel smiled. "That's all that matters." And he meant it. You can't control what people say. Only how you live. From that day forward, Daniel stopped trying to explain himself. If someone believed the rumors, he let them. If someone wanted proof, he didn't offer any. He had learned that people who truly wanted the truth would ask. Those who preferred gossip had already made up their minds. As the years passed, his investments continued to grow. His businesses expanded. He hired employees, opened new opportunities, made mistakes, learned from them, kept going. Eventually, his net worth crossed $1 million, then several million. Years later, it reached something Daniel had once thought was impossible. $10 million. He didn't feel different. He still woke up early, still read every morning, still drove himself most days, still remembered exactly what it felt like to count coins before buying lunch. The money had changed his circumstances, not his values. His family, however, looked at him very differently now. At weddings, people proudly introduced him. "This is my nephew. He's incredibly successful." At reunions, relatives wanted photos with him. Parents told their children, "You should be like Daniel." Daniel couldn't help noticing the irony. Years ago, those same children had been told not to follow his example. Success has a short memory. One evening, during a large family gathering, Daniel looked around the room. Everyone was laughing, talking, taking pictures. From the outside, it looked perfect. Yet he couldn't shake one thought. How many of these smiles would still be here? If everything disappeared tomorrow? That question stayed with him. Then came the phone call. It was his older cousin. Not the cousin who had borrowed money years ago. Another one. His voice sounded unusually serious. "Can we meet?" The next afternoon, they sat across from each other in a quiet cafe. After a few minutes of small talk, the cousin took a deep breath. "I found an incredible business opportunity." Daniel listened. "It could change my life." He slid a folder across the table. "I need you to invest." Daniel opened it. The numbers didn't make sense. The business had no customers, no clear plan, no realistic forecast. Only big promises. Daniel closed the folder gently. "I can't invest in this." His cousin frowned. "You didn't even think about it." "I did. It just isn't a responsible investment." The cousin leaned back. "So that's it?" Daniel nodded. "I hope you understand." For a moment, Neither of them spoke. Then the cousin laughed. Not because something was funny. Because he was offended. You have $10 million. You won't even notice if you lose this. Daniel answered calmly. That's exactly why I have $10 million. I don't invest based on emotion. The cousin's expression changed instantly. So all those speeches about family, they only matter when it's convenient. Daniel stayed quiet. I've helped family many times. And I'll continue helping when I truly can. But helping someone isn't the same as funding a bad decision. His cousin stood up. I knew money changed you. Then he walked away. Within days, the story had spread. Only it sounded very different. Daniel wasn't described as careful. He was described as selfish. Not responsible. Greedy. Not thoughtful. Arrogant. Some relatives stopped calling. Others removed him from family group chats. Invitations became less frequent. The silence was loud. At first, it hurt. Then one evening, Daniel sat on the porch of the house he had bought for his mother. The sun was beginning to set. She brought him a cup of tea and sat beside him. Neither of them spoke for a while. Finally she smiled. You know, when you had nothing, they doubted you. When you had something, they needed you. When you had plenty, they expected you. She looked at him. But through every stage, you were still my son. Daniel looked down at his cup. Then he quietly laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because, after all those years, he finally understood. Money had never been the real story. People were. He thought back over every stage of his life. At $0, he was invisible. At 10,000, he became acceptable. At 100,000, he became credible. At 500,000, he became useful. At 1 million, he became a target for envy. At 10 million, he became an expectation. The numbers had changed. His character hadn't. That was when the biggest lesson finally became clear. Money can buy comfort. It can buy freedom. It can buy opportunities. But it cannot buy genuine loyalty. Real love doesn't become stronger because your bank account grows. And fake love doesn't become real because you can afford it. Daniel still helps people today. But he helps differently. He gives with wisdom instead of guilt. He sets boundaries without apology. And he no longer measures relationships by who celebrates his success. He measures them by who stood beside him when success hadn't arrived yet. Because those people are priceless. So if your income changes one day, pay attention. Not just to your bank account. Pay attention to the people around you. You may discover that money doesn't change everyone. It simply reveals who they were all along. And remember this. Your income changes your lifestyle. Your character determines who deserves a seat at your table.